Hey guys, welcome to our channel. So we're starting to decode REM Losing My Religion and set enough change to set it up. We already got our variance percent. It's 2.1%. Like I said, that's not that much. It's more than, the 0.2% and some of the other stuff we have on this current chart that I showed in the last video, but not anything or not much compared to some of the ones on the other chart, which were as much as, 6 and 7%. But that still is less than 10%. And I'm estimating it would take about 25% to get, a lot of people outside the Mandela Effect community to raise an eyebrow, because that's a quarter of the song changed. These little percents aren't that much. So this one said enough change to set it up twice in the song. And so if you take the phrases and you cross this S off because it's still in set it up, you cross this I off because it's an it here over here and set it up. You cross this E off because it's over here and set it up. And you cross this U off because it's over here and set it up. Then you're left with A, D, N, O, G, H, excuse me, sorry, that was hard to see, G, H, T, H, T, T, P. And so we brought A, D, N, O, G, H, T, T, P down, and we actually did it twice because that happened twice in the song. This one's a little different. If I run them right, if I run them through well enough the first time, I only have to go halfway back, because after we get the overlap, then it becomes the same as it was the first half. So I'm sure that I'm missing some information. Maybe that line that me and my fiance can't quite agree on actually changed, but we're not including it. We're just going to see what we can get out of what maybe it's Mandela got. All right. So we're going to start this right off through the stock market. You got ADN, which ends up being Acadian Timber Corp on the TSE. And then you take AD by itself and you get Alaris Royalty Corporation. And I didn't write the market, but it's on one of the markets. I'll provide the link. Then you got DNO if you move on from that. And DNO ends up being DNO ASA on OTC markets. Then you take DN by itself and you get Delta 9 Cannabis Incorporated on the TSE. All right. I think that's Tokyo Stock Exchange. Then if you take NOG, you get Northern Oil and Gas Incorporated on the New York Stock Exchange American, NYSE American. All right. Then you move on from that, you take OG by itself, you get Organic Garden Ltd on the CVE. And you move on from that and you take GHT, which ends up being Gresham Technologies PLC on the London Exchange. You take OGH if you move on from that, and you get Ochre Group FPO on the ASC. I think that's the Australian Stock Exchange, if I'm not mistaken. Moving on from that, you got GH, which ends up being Gardent Health Incorporated on the NASDAQ. And if you move on from that, you get HT, which is Hersha Hospitality Trust on the New York Stock Exchange. If you move on from that, you get TTP, which ends up being Tortoise Papili Comnu on the New York Stock Exchange. If you move on from that, you take TPA. You're starting to overlap here. And TPA ends up being Thai Polyacrylic PLC on the Bangkok Exchange. Then you take PA, that's also in your overlap. And you get PA Resources, BHD on the KLSE. And you move on from that and you take PAD, and PAD ends up being Pan-Adian Minerals Ltd. on the Canada Stock Exchange Venture. And that gets you through going forwards, because after the overlap, it goes right back to what we did in the first part of the search. And guys, by the way, I could flip those letters around. Okay, I could, in fact, flip those letters around if I wanted to and get more out of it. But we're not going to do that. Give me 1 second, guys. All right, yeah, but we're not going to do that because we haven't been doing it for anything else. And although we could do it and get more information, I don't think it's necessary. We get most of our quantum network users just going forwards and backwards, and we could get much more information flipping the letters around. And also, I think we're missing information. HTTP is the start of a web address, any random web address, by the way. I can't seem to get one out of this, so I'm pretty sure we're missing information. All right, but that's okay. I think we can figure it out. So that gets you through going forwards. And now we're going to start coming back, and you start with PT coming back, and that ends up being Pintech Technologies Holdings Ltd. on the NASDAQ. Move on from that, you got PTT, which ends up being Public Comp / LCL SHVTGFDP on the Bangkok Exchange. All right. You move on from that, you got TT, which ends up being Train Technologies, TRANE Technologies, PLC, on the New York Stock Exchange. And if you move on from that, you got TTH, which ends up being Transition Therapeutics on the TSE. And if you move on from that, you have THG, which ends up being Hanover Insurance Group Incorporated on the New York Stock Exchange. You move on from that, you have HGO, which ends up being Hillgrove Resources Limited on the ASX. If you move on from that, you have GO, which ends up being Grocery Outlet Holding Corporation on the NASDAQ. All right, you move on from that, you get GON, and that ends up being Geron, GERON Corp on the Berlin Stock Exchange. If you move on from that, you have ON, which is ON Semiconductor Corp on the NASDAQ. Move on from that, you have NDA, which ends up being Aurubis, 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 AG on the ETR. Not really sure what that exchange is. If you move on from that, you have DAP, which ends up being Danhar Corporation on the Frankfurt Exchange. If you move on from that, you have ATP. We're in the overlap, by the way. And that ends up being Alpha Pro Tech Ltd. On the New York Stock Exchange American. And then if you move on from that, you have AP, which ends up being Ampco Pittsburgh Corp. On the New York Stock Exchange. And then we're back into where we started. Coming back, we're over the overlap, and everything else is going to run exactly the way it did in the first half, unless I rearrange the letters, which I'm not going to do at this time. And that gets you through going forwards and backwards in the stock market. So that's going to be it for stock. We'll run finance next, and then we'll head to genetics. And that'll probably be tomorrow or the next day. I've been pretty busy. And I'm going to be busy tomorrow too. Best case scenario, I might get one out tomorrow evening if I'm lucky. So that's going to be it for stock market. And again, we'll do finance next so we don't forget it in the mix. And we'll go on from there, and hopefully we can find something. Hopefully we can figure out who changed this or what group changed this. If I have to, I'll rearrange the second half of the letters to see what's there. But I hope I don't have to do that, because then I'll feel like I have to do it on every one. And I don't want to do it on every one. All right, I don't even want to do it on this one. It's a lot, guys. I mean, rearranging those letters. I mean, it could be done in a number of ways, a lot of ways, and who knows what we'd get out of it. But I don't have that kind of gumption right now to do that. And if I did, like I said, I'd feel the need to do it all the time, and I certainly don't want that because we'd never get through them. We'd just never get through them. It'd be a thing that took forever, and it takes a while as it is. So that's going to be it for this one. For now, thanks for all your thumbs up, thumbs down when appropriate. By the way, if you're still with me and you get anything out of these videos, please thumb up. And thanks for all your comments, leads, feedback, and subscriptions. And sorry we ran this longer than I wanted to, but that's the way it goes, it seems. And thanks for watching, guys. And finance will be next. And so for now, you guys have a great rest of your evening.